Hello everyone, and welcome to the conclusion of Chapter 2, First Civilizations, City-States and Unequal Societies. Today we're going to compare Mesopotamia and Egypt. Okay, let's start with environment and culture. Both depended on rivers, but were very different. There was erratic and destructive flooding in Mesopotamia. However, the Nile in Egypt flooded more predictably and less destructively. Mesopotamia was less geographically isolated than Egypt. Mesopotamia was vulnerable to external attack. However, Egypt was usually protected from outside attacks. Many scholars see a relationship between the physical setting and the culture. There's a more negative Mesopotamian worldview. It seems to reflect its precarious and violent environment, while in Egypt, their worldview reflected the more stable, predictable, and beneficent environment in which it took shape. Now, the environmental impact of the rising population in both areas is also different. In southern Mesopotamia, deforestation, soil erosion, and salinization of the soil weakened the Sumerian city-states, leading to foreign conquest and the northward shift to Mesopotamia's cultural centers. Egypt built a more sustainable agricultural system that contributed to the remarkable continuity of its civilization. Now, after about 1,000 years of independent and competitive existence, the city-states of Sumer were incorporated into a number of larger imperial states based in Akkad, Babylon, and then Assyria. So let's look at this map 2.2 of Mesopotamia and compare the importance of Egypt's geography with that of Mesopotamia. Whereas Egypt enjoyed a degree of quote-unquote free security by being surrounded by deserts, mountains, seas, and unnavigable stretches of the Upper Nile, Mesopotamia was an open landscape without serious obstacles to travel, making it vulnerable to invasion. Cities and states. Now, the political systems of Mesopotamia and Egypt differed sharply. Mesopotamia, for its first 1,000 years, was organized into a dozen or more separate city-states. Each city-state was ruled by a king. About 80% of the population lived in city-states for protection. The environmental devastation and endemic warfare ultimately led to conquest by outside forces after approximately 2350 BCE. These outside powers built large territorial states or bureaucratic empires encompassing all or most of Mesopotamia. But in Egypt, around 3100 BCE, several earlier states or chiefdoms merged into a unified territory that stretched some 1,000 miles along the Nile River. And for 3,000 years, Egypt maintained its unity and independence with few interruptions. More Egyptians lived in agricultural villages, perhaps because of greater security. The pharaoh, a god in human form, was the focus of the Egyptian state. And from 2200 to 2000 BCE, there's a bit of anarchy. When the state restored, the pharaohs never really regained their old power. Interaction and exchange. Egypt and Mesopotamia frequently interacted. Egypt's agriculture benefited from this interaction. And Egypt had a quote-unquote divine kingship, and it seems to have been derived from central or eastern Sudan. Now, both Mesopotamia and Egypt carried on extensive long-distance trade. Mesopotamian sea trade with the Indus Valley civilization began as early as 2300 BCE. Mesopotamian trade with Anatolia, Egypt, Iran, and Afghanistan. Egyptian traded in the Mediterranean and the Middle East. They traded with Nubia and along the East African coast. Now, the Mesopotamian and Egyptian cultural influences moved along these trade routes. Hebrews migrated from Mesopotamia to Palestine and Egypt early in their history. The Phoenicians, which is present-day Lebanon, were commercially active in the Mediterranean basin. They adapted the Sumerian cuneiform to an easier alphabet, hence the term phonetics, Phoenicians. Some Indo-European people settled in north-central Anatolia. They sustained contact between Nubia and Egypt, and Egyptian influence was strong in the Mediterranean basin. Now, Mesopotamia and Egypt were also influenced by their neighbors. The Indo-Europeans brought horse and chariot-based armies to Mesopotamia, and Indo-European Hittites conquered the Babylonian Empire about 1595 BCE. And beginning in 1650 BCE, foreigners from surrounding regions migrated into the Nile Valley. The Egyptians adopted chariot technology, new kinds of armor. They improved the spinning and weaving methods, developed new musical instruments, and olive and pomegranate trees. By 1500 BCE, Egypt had become an imperial state. They ruled over non-Egyptian peoples in both Africa and Asia. And the regular diplomatic correspondence with Middle Eastern empires also is important. Okay, Egypt and Nubia. This wall painting from the tomb of an Egyptian court official dated to the 15th century BC, and it shows Nubians bringing animals as tribute to Egyptian authorities. So what does the practice depicted in this mural tell us about the political relationship between Nubia and Egypt? Well, the practice of delivering animals as tribute tells us that Nubia was less powerful than its Egyptian neighbors to the north, and at the time of the mural's creation, Nubia may have been under Egypt's political control. Now, this is the map showing the Egyptian Empire, map 2.3. During the New Kingdom period after 1550 BCE, Egypt became for several centuries an empire, extending its political control southward into Nubia and northward into Palestine and Syria. So what geographical features and political realities influenced the extent and shape of the Egyptian New Kingdom Empire? Well, Egypt itself was surrounded by deserts and mountains, so its expansion on the African continent was limited to the Nile Valley. Its expansion north and east maintained a similar proximity to bodies of water. The extent of the Egyptian New Kingdom Empire also was constrained by the presence of several other civilizations, including the Hittites to the north and Mesopotamian civilization in Babylonia and Assyria to the east. So let's interpret the map. What geographic factors might have made it difficult for Egyptian pharaohs to expand their empire farther or even maintain its New Kingdom borders? The same deserts and mountains that gave Egypt quote-unquote free protection also prevented its expansion along and out from the Nile Valley. The Syrian and Arabian deserts to the east and the mountains of Anatolia to the north would have made an expansion beyond the empire's holdings in Palestine and Syria equally difficult. Meanwhile, control of lands south of the cataracts would be difficult to maintain, while the Syrian and Palestinian territories were also open to invasion from Mesopotamia. So let's explain how human interaction with the environment affected both Egyptian and Nubian civilizations. Now, these civilizations both depended on stable, sustainable agriculture, dependent on the regular annual flooding of the Nile, and a generally non-intrusive irrigation system. So this interaction is with the natural environment. All right. Evaluate the extent to which Mohenjo-Daro revealed evidence of urban planning. That's what this is a wall painting of, a city called Mohenjo-Daro. Mohenjo-Daro was laid out systematically in a grid-like pattern, surrounded by walls made of standardized mud bricks and segmented by main streets and neighborhoods with their own market areas and public buildings. Wealthier inhabitants of neighborhoods lived in multi-story houses with indoor plumbing. Yes, indoor plumbing, bathrooms, and private wells, while workers lived in standardized two-room houses. A complex sewer system lay underneath the city's streets, which is pretty amazing considering how old this is. Evaluate the extent to which patterns of urban life from Mohenjo-Daro have been continuities with patterns of urban life today. Well, we should include similarities that that focus on neighborhoods, sewer systems, public areas and buildings, standardized housing, and grid-like urban planning that all has continued into today's urban life. How might a prominent landowner, a leading official, a clan head, or a merchant make use of such a seal? The humped cattle seal from Mohenjo-Daro. Well, the seal might be used to mark ownership of trade goods destined for transport, or to represent a specific clan, a high official, or a prominent individual. Other possible uses include decoration, financial or commercial contracts, or even a symbol of authority. What meaning might you attach to the use of animals as totems or symbols of a particular group or individual? Well, animals possess symbolic meanings in the Indus Valley Civilization, and specific animals may have been associated with specific professions, clans, or peoples. Animals may have been used as totems, and their inclusion on seals was destined to protect or safeguard the item attached to the seal. And animals provided a simple written language that the illiterate members of society could recognize and understand. Oh, yes, the royal priest of Harappa. What specific features of the statue could you point out? Okay, what stands out? The headband, the armband, clothing pattern. The facial features of the figure are also pronounced, and his beard. What possible indication of elite status can you identify? The headband and armband may be signs of elite status. The pattern on his clothing may imply wealth or status, and his beard may also be a sign of status. What might an archaeologist learn by carefully examining a statue like this? Now, the driver of this cart appears to be female. If so, what does this cart suggest about gender roles in the Indus Valley Civilization? Well, by examining this model, an archaeologist might learn more about everyday domestic and economic life, technological advancement, and gender roles in the Indus Valley Civilization. That driver, like I said, appears to be female, and that suggests that gender roles were less stratified and patriarchy was less dominant in the Indus Valley as opposed to some of the other first civilizations. So what's the purpose of this statue? Well, it could be a toy, the role of toys in the home, not only as a way to amuse and distract children, but also to teach them. That's possible. Oh, and our infamous Indus Valley dancing girl. So Gregory Possehl says that, quote unquote, a girl perfectly for the moment, perfectly confident of herself and the world. That's what he says about this. He's an American archaeologist, active in archaeology of the Indus Valley Civilization. And he said that we may not be certain that she was a dancer, but she was good at what she did and she knew it. Kind of has that air of confidence. Now, thinking about that quote, what features of this statue may have provoked such observations? Maybe her body posture and facial features convey confidence. Her bracelets and other jewelry might speak to her status and perhaps her profession. Evaluate the extent to which the statue provides clues as to ancient views of the female body. Well, the nude female form was considered beautiful. The statue is of a dancer. The Indus Valley Civilization may have found female nudity acceptable in some public or semi-public situations. Long legs and a thin frame may have been considered signs of female beauty in the Indus Valley Civilization. And times erotic art was part of the Indus Valley's artistic tradition. And that concludes Chapter 2, The Unequal Societies. And I will see you guys again for Chapter 3.